Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences, such as...
We could turn a negative into a positive. Drew Lynch, Samuel Comroe worked with him, and he said on America's Got Talent, I want to turn a negative into a positive just so that we could laugh at it and not be afraid of it. And that's what I'm like, I want to do the same thing.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Am I too positive on this podcast, like in a bad way? You know, if we think about, like unrealistic optimism, persuasive cheerleading, spin doctoring. Be honest, do you ever think I fall into that or have become that in the course of doing this podcast? I hope not, because what I hope to have is, I guess, a good attitude toward realism, inclusive of all the, the horrible negatives that we have to process as human beings, Tourette or otherwise. I was talking with Sophia about this, Sophia being the admin of the Tourette's podcast discussion group, but I think most importantly, a really balanced and level person when it comes to, giving real perspective and analyzing things. Oh, she just posted a really interesting poll in the Facebook group that I want to talk about for a minute in the outro part of this episode. But anyway, Sophia and I are talking, and we go into the subject of what, people have called toxic positivity, quote unquote, which, is in itself a negative pressure. Not in the context of me necessarily doing that, although I admit maybe there have been a number of times where I've taken this sort of unrealistically and maybe even irresponsibly positive approach. And to be clear, no one has said this to me. No one's emailed me telling me to tone it down or get real. Like, hey, Ben, with all this positive outlook stuff, you're getting hard to take seriously. You're going to lose your ability to relate by handing out platitudes. Like Viv Savage at the very end of This Is Spinal Tap when Marty DeBurgi asks, his philosophy on life. He says, have a good time all the time. Which is advice equal parts great and absurd, which, and why I'm talking about this is I'm about to get really negative. Just kidding. I'm totally joking. I'm not. Our guest this week, 14-year-old Jack Kearney, got me thinking about how we present ourselves and what we signal to the world, and challenging ourselves to think about whether we're being honest with ourselves or whether we're just following the instructions or expectations of community. And I'm not talking about this in any political light or anything like that, promise. But it is to say, I think, remember how you would put your mind to something in a way that's clear and effective to you. So there's a really good theme ahead on this episode that you don't have to walk lockstep with community. You can have the same goals, the same end goals, or you can have a modified version of the goals of the community, but you also have your own style with it. And, criticism in its best form is a very positive thing. And new ideas, change the consensus. I think the Tourette community understands all this, but I still use the word community. And I like the idea that community can still exist with a mix of dynamics and opinions, just like we want for the greater world. Like the Tourette community has tons in common, but, we're different people. I think there's a lot in this episode about learning your frame of reference, being observant, and taking in experiences within your life and how others describe their own experiences, and where you, quote unquote, fit in with the population, but also to draw your own conclusions from what you know. And sometimes that isn't quite so parallel with that of the greater community. And that's what I got from Jack in this conversation. Not that he's a Tourette community anarchist or anything like that. He's into it. He's really supportive. He's done a lot of work with the Tourette Association. But he's not letting community have sway over his sense of individualism and what works best for him, which I think is so important to remember, and is why I have no problem hearing critical feedback from listeners who have a different perspective on something I've said, or flat out disagree with me, or better yet, can correct me if I've said something factually wrong or inconsiderate. Absolutely contact me so I can publicly correct it and benefit from that. And if you can, please send me source material so I can make corrections without any doubt whatsoever. With Jack, he's been learning the facts of his world, what Tourette is for him, how it fits into what he wants to do with his life, working with it at school and friends and things like that, but expressing his perspective on that in his own style, in his own language. You've got, you know what I'm saying. You'll hear what I mean. We do discuss some alternate takes on the Tourette joke and what happens when people make it and what happens when we adopt it and make it our own Tourette joke. Just in case, let me say that part of the conversation shouldn't be perceived as being in conflict or challenging in any way to the pledge that the Tourette Association asks people to make or sign their name to, which is to never make the Tourette joke and stop it, with the mean-spirited stuff and try to educate people who do cross those lines. Like totally, yeah, completely. I'm all about that. So don't confuse what Jack and I are talking about as being in conflict with that. This is something else. Okay, so that's coming right up. And I have to get to this one really good email from the listener mailbag. Maybe it's something you've been thinking all along. So this is a question, or really a request, from a listener named Anthony, who says, when you use certain terms on the podcast, could you define them? I'm undiagnosed, but I know I have Tourette's. This podcast has helped me a lot, but I don't always know the terminology. And there's more to it, but that's the operative part. So that's great. That's like an excellent point. There weren't any example words in the email from Anthony, but someone did ask me about echolalia recently, which has been mentioned over the course of the podcast, and I think more than usual recently. So someone did ask me about that, about echolalia, what it is and how that works. Definitely in the workshop right now is a primer on Tourette syndrome, to where I think even if you've lived with it your whole life, you might learn something from it. Getting an expert on who can walk us through what Tourette is and what comes with it, what we know about it at this point. Echolalia might be a good one to dig into a little bit. So I got this email from Anthony, the one I just read, that came in a couple weeks ago. And we did take off last week on the podcast. It was a mental health break. But yeah, this is important, this question. I think I do try to be clear or explanatory when we talk about certain things here, but I'm not always. So that's a great point. Echolalia, let's just hit that one real quick. My source here is Tourette.org, an overview page on the website dealing with diagnosis. And there's a subsection here titled Echo Phenomena, Echo Speech, or Echolalia. It says here, these types of tics are reported, although less frequently. These may include repeating words of others, echolalia, repeating one's own words, palilalia, or palolalia, and repeating movements of others. And that's from Tourette.org, the website of the Tourette Association of America. So put really simply from that, echolalia is the repeating of words of others. And so I had mentioned in a couple recent episodes, and to be clear, no doctor of mine has ever mentioned echolalia to me, at least not in memory. But I've always had this thing that fits the definition of echolalia, repeating things in the same kind of voice I hear them in, even doing the accent. And I don't know if this steps outside of echolalia or not, just something I do without thinking. I hear something that has a certain quality to it, and I repeat it like I do an impression of it, you could say. And I always feel, I guess, kind of silly after I do it. Anyway, I visited my grandmother this last weekend. That's why we skipped a week on the podcast. And here's her story about this. What did you say that I did when I was a little kid involving grandfather? Because I want to preserve this.
Oh, he coughed. And you looked up and you coughed. And I said, Bill, he mimicked you. And I said, in a minute, I said, try it again. And you just looked up. You coughed also. We did that, I would say, at least a dozen times, and you did it every time. Oh, Marilyn told me that she is going somewhere, and she had you on the bed laying on your back. And she said, you're precious. And you just looked up at her and said, no, you are precious. And that was how her name,
she got her
the
name
reason
Precious.
that she got the name Precious.
That kind of cracked me up, just the curiosity around it. So worth sharing, I think. That was Pearl Brown, my extremely supportive grandmother, which brings us back around to our guest this week, who has really awesome supportive parents. We get some testimony on that and much more. This is me talking with Jack Kearney.
Hi, my name is Jack Kearney. I am 14 years old, and I live in New York State, and I live right around the Rockland area.
Okay, so is that ninth grade for you?
Yeah, it's ninth grade. I'm going to be a freshman this year.
See, that's always an interesting point to begin because, talking to a lot of people in the community, when they transition from something like middle school to high school, or there's a new structure or maybe a new set of, social challenges or people you meet, that kind of thing, it can be kind of, I guess to use one word, kind of triggering for people. Has that been a challenge for you to transition from middle school to high school?
Well, I wouldn't really know yet because it's still summer break and I'm going to be a freshman.
Yeah.
So, but moving from elementary school to middle school, I could say that, yeah, it's been pretty challenging because how we do it, we have 3 elementary schools and then we combine those 3 and then we just go to that middle school. So, yeah, that's been kind of tough because like I explained my Tourette's to all my friends in my elementary school. So it's been harder to like tell it to like a bigger group of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been tough to do that, but it was actually kind of it was tough and easy at the same time, kind of, because it was tough because like new people, oh my god, this is crazy, and easy like after like a month, I started to settle in and started to like tell different people that I have Tourette's if they have any questions to ask me.
How did people around you react to that kind of thing? Was it surprise, or did people kind of adjust how they act around you, or are they more sensitive to you, or how do people tend to respond?
Usually, my friends say, I asked my friends one time, I was like, what's it like to have a friend with Tourette's? And they go, it's just like having a friend who doesn't. Like we get used to your tics, and we get used to your tics, and it's just like it's kind of like background noise now.
Yeah.
So pretty much the same thing with different people because, when I didn't tell them, they would just like stare and like, oh, what's this kid's problem? Like he's twitching. Is he having a seizure or something? Like, they'd stare, they'd like faces kind of. And then once like that, like 1 month passed, I guess they get used to it because like I wouldn't see any more staring. I wouldn't see any more like faces made towards me. So, and then when I'd actually tell them that I have Tourette's, they'd kind of like be like, oh, that's why.
Is there a way that you explain it to them? Because TS can be kind of unrelatable to people because it's hard to imagine something like that being involuntary. Why can't you just hold it in, that kind of thing? I mean, do you have a specific way of trying to convey what it's like so they kind of get that it's not just like, something you can hold back?
Yeah. I used to have youth ambassadors come to my school and like explain what Tourette's is and like how to cope with it. But I kind of took it over. Like I was like, listen, it's amazing. Like this kid's really official. Like he brought like youth ambassadors that work for the TA.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, this kid's kind of like official. But then I kind of took it over because I thought I could do it myself. Like I don't feel like I didn't really need anyone's help.
Yeah.
So I just took it over. Like I'd speak in front of my entire class and stuff like that. And so that they'd understand what it's like to have Tourette's, I'd say, don't blink for 60 seconds. And if you blink, just like kind of raise your hand. And if you don't, then just keep your hand down. So
that's great.
Yes. So a lot of people would raise their hand. Like I'd say like 80% of the crowd would raise their hand. Around 20 kept their hands down, but I could tell they were struggling.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the involuntary blink was coming.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, I'd say that's exactly what it's like to hold in a tic. Like it's really hard. Like you start to get I wouldn't say tired per se. I'd say kind of like annoyed.
Yeah.
after a while. So like, and then afterwards they're like, oh, that makes sense.
That's cool because I mean that gives them direct appreciation to. I mean, you gave them a feeling or a sensation or something where they had to negotiate with. And what you said about wanting to kind of take it on yourself, I definitely feel that because, you know, community is great to have when it comes to just connecting with people, finding your sense of place. But that's kind of like the ultimate, I think, is, you may be a member of a community or there may be a million people, with Tourette syndrome that you can connect with, but, you're still an individual. You still have your own story. And if you let community, I think, talk too much for you, I don't think that's a good thing. Community is great to have.
Exactly.
And you can learn yourself better, but don't get lost in community and sloganeering and things like that. I think it's still really good to remember your context with that community and why you went there to begin with, because you have something, you have your own challenge. And if you don't address it in a way that's completely tailored to you, then, you may be living somebody else's life. And I really like that you wanted to brand it your way.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Around in 6th grade, I'd tell my friends, listen, I'm kind of sick and tired of saying I have Tourette's, I can't help it, blah, blah, blah. I tell my friends, like, I'm tired. Why don't you tell them? Because I don't really feel like, because I've been saying that since I was around 7 years old.
Yeah.
So it's been tiring for that amount of time. So I was like, yo, just kind of inform them for me. But like after like a year, I was like, okay, I'm fine now. You're good to go.
When you mentioned the challenge transitioning, from like elementary school to middle, and things that may repeat themselves in some way, middle school to high school, does it feel like you're kind of starting over again with explaining your context, or do you feel like you have a much better handle on it to where if you do meet a new group of people, you have a better or more practiced way of explaining it?
Yeah, because I've had Tourette. Like I said, I've had Tourette since I was 7. So, I'm kind of like I've been practicing ever since. So, I found easier ways, and I've found more complicated ways, so that like if they're confused, I could like get into the details.
Yeah.
So, if I'm in high school and there's a new kid, right? Because new kids are great, by the way, because you have we have new people that don't know what Tourette's is, and the more new people, the more people that are educated on it.
Yeah.
So instantly, I'd see like the new kids just kind of stare at me and look towards my direction, make faces.
Yeah.
And one time, I think I was in like 5th grade. New kid came up to someone I think they were friends with, and they said, yo, what's wrong with that kid? And they were like, oh, that's Jack, he has Tourette's, just leave it be. And then he's like, So I feel like, yeah, like I said, it's been easier with the amount of people there, like the amount of people that that know what Tourette's is and like that I have it and stuff like that. So yeah.
See, that's cool. I mean, one thing that you have that I already knew in advance. So I introduced you and your mom at the gala, which was in 2020. I mean, you have a lot of support in your family, and that's awesome. Maybe your mom's account was one of the first when I was really trying to explore Tourette syndrome for myself and acclimate myself better to the sense of community a few years ago. I think your mom's account was one of the first ones I saw.
Oh, that's crazy.
What you guys are pretty active with TAA and ambassadorship in general. How did that come together? Or maybe did you do it to sort of still have a handle on your own narrative while you're also talking in a community setting about Tourette syndrome?
So how we got there, I'll be 100% honest, I have no idea. That's all my mom.
Yeah, me neither.
And, ever since, like, I even realized ever since we've been in contact and, like, in partnership, if I should say, with the TAA, it's been so much easier because we have more resources to look onto, like, so that we can educate ourselves. Honestly, that's about it. Like, it's easier just to look at the information that other people have, the experiences that other people have. And I just think that ever since we've saw the TAA, it's been easier just for me and my family.
Do you remember So when you were diagnosed, obviously, you were pretty young.
Yeah.
But do you remember going from this diagnosis that feels like it's something that's, you and you don't necessarily know that sense of community or how many other people out there have it, or are they like you, that kind of thing? Do you remember going from those thoughts that a lot of people live with kind of in isolation to going from that into learning more about community and how it relates to you and, how similar you may be to other people out there who have Tourette? Like, do you remember what that was like? And not just how it happened. Do you have any memories of how that made you feel? Just that context of like, I'm not the only one. This is something that a lot of people deal with.
Yeah. I remember the first kid I met with Tourette's. That's not just me. His name was Josiah. He was on my lacrosse team. I saw him twitching and stuff. I was like, that looks familiar.
Yeah.
I see that in the mirror every day. I think there's like this other kid. I'm not sure, but I think he thought that he had Tourette's. So he asked him, "Hey, do you have Tourette's?" And then he goes, No, I don't. I don't know what that is. And I just popped him out of nowhere, like Houdini, and just go, "Hey, I have Tourette's." And he goes, "Oh, that's crazy, dude. I have Tourette's too."
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah, we've been friends ever since.
That's awesome. So he was ready to, not going to have it with his peers, which is what I did. I would have never let anybody have the information that I had Tourette syndrome, because kind of like you, but in a different way, I really wanted to control the narrative of myself to the point where I just didn't want people knowing anything about me. So that made me, I don't know if that made me, but that plays into my, I think, introversion, which kind of persists into my adulthood, which I'm completely fine with, by the way. That's not a complaint about myself. I like being introverted.
Yeah.
But yeah, being in a position where it can feel threatening if other people know this about you, to having at least one other person, who can speak your same language.
Exactly.
That's huge. I mean, that probably changed things for him, from that point on. At least just having the knowledge that there's somebody else in his orbit or in his proximity who has TS and knows what he's dealing with.
Yeah. So I was wondering, do you like Star Wars? Like, have you seen all the movies and stuff like that?
I haven't seen all the Star Wars movies. I'm a fan of the classic ones, for sure. Yeah. I've been lazy about the newer ones.
Yeah. So ever since I met Josiah, like I'm like Yoda. I've been saying to myself, "There's another."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like I found out that, I'm not just some freak of nature. Like, there are other people like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just found that Star Wars quote, so it kind of like hit home to be real. Like, there is another Skywalker, but there's also another kid with Tourette's, which is crazy.
And I think it's an easy, I don't want to call it a trap, but you know what I mean? It's an easy trap to fall into, to feel like your experience is so singular that no one's going to get it. And, I feel that way all the time. I mean, I say that, we shouldn't act like that, but I feel that way all the time, that it just takes reminding yourself that a lot of people have lived on this earth, and there are a lot of people living right now who are going through challenges that are maybe comparable to yours or worse. And I'm not saying that, like, think of the people who have it more tough. I'm just thinking, there are people out there who are going to get my story when other people may not, just having that experience. And that's true for any community, whether it's a diagnosis or some other walk of life or something cultural, or, that's important. But, again, going back to the individual nature of that really gives the character, I think, to that community. I had a pen pal when I was maybe 13. I just found a photograph of him a couple days ago. His name was Drew. He lived in outside Cincinnati, Ohio. And he was maybe, I think, the first person my age I knew who had Tourette syndrome. And he didn't live anywhere near me. Yeah. I live in North Carolina. He lived in Kentucky. But I do vividly remember that trip. It was a summer trip. We went out there just to hang out with them for a week. And it was a blast. And our families related. We were both into collecting baseball cards and stuff like that. So we both brought baseball cards to trade. But our parents, they had the chance to kind of hang out, and they related to each other as parents of kids with Tourette syndrome.
Yeah.
And it was really neat, because that was I think kind of eye-opening for both our families. And I think really relieving. We're still just kids, we're just having, we're in the other room trading baseball cards. That's what we're up to, And it's nice getting that context out of the way to where you can just be a kid again and not have to explain everywhere you go or not have to worry about it everywhere you go. And you can finally focus on your individualism without it being something on somebody else's terms. So 14, getting into to ninth grade, have you already thought about what you know, and you don't have to think about this at all at your age, but have you thought about directions you kind of want to go, like talents, interests, things like that?
Yes, actually. I've been wanting to know what I wanted to do ever since I was in 6th grade. So,
okay.
Do you know the stand-up comic Samuel Comroe?
Yeah, he's fantastic. And for anybody who doesn't know, comedian with Tourette syndrome who got pretty far on. Was it America's Got Talent?
It was. Yeah. Ever since I saw him, I'm like, that's crazy. Like, I didn't know. First off, I was a little younger, so I didn't I didn't know that there were other people with Tourette. So I saw him, I go, what if I'm up there? And ever since I said that to myself, I want to be a stand-up comic.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And to get there, I planned this out like last year. To get there, I want to enlist in the military.
You have a plan?
Yeah. I want to enlist in the military. I want to enlist for 5-6 years. And when I'm out, I want to go to Notre Dame College, right? And work at a mechanic, work at a car mechanic shop. Okay. Just so I could get a couple bucks so I could start my gigs. That's about it.
Have you been, I'm not going to ask you to that's the one thing. As soon as you tell somebody you're into stand-up comedy or something like that, I think the thing is oh, tell me a joke, which I'm not going to do to you right now.
Good. I could tell a joke all day.
I am curious. Is it like Tourette material, or is it something that's more separated from that so people don't have to think about it? Or
sometimes
what's your approach?
Yeah, sometimes it is Tourette material. I have a couple of Tourette jokes. I usually just any other ordinary stand-up comic, I like to go on my visuals. I like to see what's going on in the world and make fun of it, because that's really the reason why I want to be a stand-up comic. Not to make fun of anything, but just so we could turn a negative into a positive, right? So Drew Lynch, Samuel Comroe worked with him, and he said on America's Got Talent, he said, I want to turn a negative into a positive just so that we could laugh at it and not be afraid of it. And
that's so cool.
That's what I'm like, I want to do the same thing.
You're doing it the right way, because, there's, and I'm sure you're aware of this, there's all kinds of sensitivity, and rightly so, in the Tourette community about, Tourette jokes and, what's funny, what isn't, who's allowed to say things, and all that makes sense. But I think it's really unifying if you approach it the way you're approaching it, which is, there are all kinds of things in this world that are really challenging, and we would never make jokes to, at the expense of somebody's grieving or somebody's suffering or anything like that. But if you kind of zoom out, there's a lot of, and I've said this on the podcast, I find comfort in absurdity and ridiculousness and almost like slapstick situations where it is a defense mechanism to keep me from getting too stressed out. I think if I just, kind of laugh internally at how ridiculous, this scenario has gotten, or I've been standing in line, at the post office for an hour and a half to, just something. There's always something that the level of absurdity that we can kind of experience and typically get laughed or that we can typically get mad at is something I think I can personally choose to laugh at. Yeah. And again, not in a way to offend anybody, but just to kind of appreciate, it's like, I'm on the planet for 85, 90 years, if I live a full life, and there's all kinds of stuff that can age you quickly, and it's stress, and it's getting wound up about things. And so I feel like that's been kind of like a savior for me to just really kind of embrace the natural comedy of life. And that's a whole literary topic. But when you do that, and when you take that out into the world, that helps people connect. Some people, they don't want to joke. And that's fine. I respect that. Yeah. But it is a way to start conversations with people in a way that doesn't chase people out of the room. I don't want to be too hardcore about Tourette syndrome. And if someone, doesn't get it or makes fun of it or something, I don't want my first instinct to be anger. It's either going to be, this guy's worth explaining it to, or he's not. I'm almost not inclined to do the educational pamphlet thing and say, oh, well, it turns out it's a serious thing and I have Tourette syndrome and here's what it is. It just doesn't translate. Sometimes if you just have a laugh with people, and I'm not saying let people make fun of you, but sometimes if you can connect that way. I think you know what I mean.
I love it. I'm not saying like it's a good thing. Like it's really not, but I like it when people make fun of me because of my Tourette's. Number one, half the things they say are complete BS. Like, oh, you have Tourette's. Yeah. I haven't heard you curse once.
Of course.
And second, so I could get good material on crazy things that people said to me in the past.
Yeah.
And when people say like Tourette is probably going to last your entire life, I kind of want it to last my entire life for crazy experiences like that, and just so I can make fun of it. Just so I can make fun of it because people are like, oh, it's a bad thing. We shouldn't joke about it. And I'm like, if we don't joke about it, then people are going to think that it's a bad thing. Like, because if we joke about it, we're going to laugh at it because we shouldn't be afraid of it. We have to laugh at it just so that we could get a good, how do we say, like, reaction type thing.
That's a cool way to look at that. That's really interesting. I've heard people talk about having sort of a lighthearted approach to their own TS in their life, but I really like that. I mean, that's you have a definition with it. You have a sense of purpose and how you're going about that, and it's not just you leave some negative comment about Tourette syndrome on the table unchecked. The whole point of this is to help people connect and understand better. So that's really cool. That's admirable. And I think it's different than a lot of approaches now when it comes with Tourette syndrome. And you're right. It can be so sensitive and so almost like sad in context. That is so sensitive that because it adds this delicacy that makes people nervous. That changes how people perceive or take in information too. And I haven't thought about this the way you're thinking about it.
Ever since when I was diagnosed, I'm like, oh, this is like the reason why I was scared when I was first diagnosed is because of the word syndrome. Because not like 2 years before that, I had met a kid who had Down syndrome. And I was kind of nervous because, number one, I'm a kid. I don't have any shame. So I was like 5 at the time. I looked at him, I'm like, what's wrong with him? And again, I was 7. So I was kind of like, oh, syndrome. I'm going to be like that kid I met in the park. And not that Yeah. So
that was your frame of reference.
Yeah. I was really scared. And then like a year after, I'm like, oh, this is fine. Like, I'm not hurting anyone. No one's hurting me. It's all good.
It's not to say that, anybody with any other kind of disorder or syndrome or diagnosis, is lesser than or anything like that. It was that was your frame of reference and your sense of curiosity because it's a syndrome. Does this all mean one thing or what does this mean for my future? And completely natural things to think about, which I think also helps you to have appreciation for what other people go through as well. If it's something that is misunderstood or maybe is something people make fun of or, you're in a better position to understand them because of your position and how you've had to kind of negotiate things.
You pretty much phrased it completely right. Like I was 5, didn't know what was going on. Like I was still experiencing the world. I didn't know what the world looked like. So ever since I saw that kid with Down syndrome, I was like, that's not normal. Like, because I didn't experience it yet. So ever since I did experience it, I was like, okay, so not everyone is normal. There are some people like me and that kid from the park that has to go through something day after day that's incredibly hard to deal with. I thought I was just diagnosed with Tourette's. I have Tourette's and ADHD. If you were curious to, I thought I was just diagnosed with Tourette's. I didn't know that I had ADHD. I didn't know I had a follow-up or whatever. So
I
met.
I have ADHD too.
Yeah. I I met a girl in my class. She said that she had ADHD. I was like, oh, so there's Tourette syndrome, there's Down syndrome, there's ADHD. Let me add that to the list.
Yeah.
And then I asked my Mom, I met a girl who has ADHD. That's letters. That's not a word. And she goes, you have ADHD too. I go, oh, that's crazy. And ever since I learned that I had ADHD, I was like, so I have ADHD and Tourette's. I have 2. Some people come with 1. I'm lucky. No, I'm not.
Yeah, I have ADHD, OC tendencies, sleep issues, major depressive disorder.
Oh wow,
generalized anxiety, and there's a lot of stuff that
you got the deluxe
comes
pack.
with it. Yeah, totally. I got the premium, and that is first off, just as you were phrasing it. I mean, it is kind of a quick early education in just the concept of diversity. I think you arrive at that pretty early on when, okay, there's something different about me than these other people. You're having to learn that in a pretty hardcore real life practiced way. And that's what I meant, it's just, I think you can relate to other people, especially, with comedy too. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line is relating with people and finding things that people find funny, and then you can educate at the same time. And that's all about being connective and having that sense of empathy to where you're going to say something that the audience feels, or if it's something they're unfamiliar with, you can say it in a way that they understand. Mm-hmm. And I think it just takes kind of walking, from a different angle or vantage point to be able to do that, which you have. And especially, with something like ADHD on top of TS, I mean, I will say that's probably a bigger deal for me right now than my tics. I definitely tic every day, it's always there, but that doesn't bother me quite like the other things do, ADHD and depression and things like that. So that's what I have to treat when I take medication. But I did see this meme the other day, and I really related to it. It was about ADHD, and let's see if you relate to it too. Okay. It was a girl brushing her teeth.
Yeah.
And then there are these words popping up on the screen where it's like she's being reminded to do certain things. And she's like, oh, wait, I have to do the laundry. And then she walks away. Then she walks back into the bathroom. She's like, wait a minute, I have to finish brushing my teeth.
Exactly.
And then she thinks about the laundry again, and then something else. And it's like she walks down the hallway in 2 different directions. And like that's me constantly every day. And I don't know how I get through it, but I do.
Yeah, like I'd have to let's say I have to go to the bathroom, because my bathroom is let's say I'm in the living room, you have to walk past the kitchen to get to the bathroom. So me, because first off, I don't want to be insensitive, but when I was like 8 to 10, I was fat. I loved eating food. I was a chunky monkey, like what my mother likes to call me. So I would stop, look in the refrigerator, and forget that I had to pee. And I'd lay back on the couch and go, oh, I have to pee. So I'd have to walk past the refrigerator, not being tempted to open it, but I had to pee, so I can't do that. I have a joke from having Tourette and ADHD. It goes, so if you didn't know, I have Tourette's, and get this, ADHD. Yes, that's right. I have the deluxe pack. I have Tourette's Plus. So it's kind of crazy because Tourette's and ADHD, not a good, not that great of a combo. It's like oil and water. But some might say, like Forrest Gump, they go together like peas and carrots. So, it's sometimes not that great of a combo, but other times it is. Sometimes you could even laugh at me for forgetting to do something. And I love it when people laugh at me and with me. If you laugh at me, then I'd laugh right back at you, because it's funny to watch someone forget how to do things. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
I was picturing what you were saying while you were laying all that out. This is me. So this is what I do at work. I'm working on the computer, and I have to like pee really bad or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think of like something else. So when I'm working, this is in the context of me editing photos or writing or editing a video. That's what I do. And I think of something like, oh, there's an idea. I better get that down before I get up.
Yeah.
And then I'll just plow through it. And for the next like 20 minutes, I'm like, wait a minute. All right. I gotta pee. I'm getting up. And then another thought will hit me. And then I'll write that down for a little bit. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta get up. So I'll get up, and then I'll see one of my cats or something like that. And they need something. They need food. So I feel just basically my brain finds every way to keep doing except like everything but the one thing that's like the most pressing, urgent thing. And I don't know what that is, because sometimes I do find myself, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the same thing, but sometimes I do find myself really putting off things that are easy to do, but I'm expected to do them right now.
Yeah.
So if it's, laundry or watering the plants or just something, the fact that I'm not being asked, because nobody asked me, the fact that the circumstances I need to do this thing right now makes me not want to do it and do something else. And I don't know what that is, but I've gotten really, really skilled at this, I think, at procrastinating and pulling things out at the last minute. And something about that kind of works for me. Just this like getting distracted left and right, but it's almost like a pinball machine, where I'm getting batted around to these different things. But ultimately, if I play it right and the circumstances are good, I'm going to end up in the right position, which sounds totally chaotic and weird, and it is, but that's something that just kind of I've become accustomed to.
The Tourette Association of America is the premier nonprofit working to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to those with Tourette syndrome or tic disorder. With a network of over 130 chapters, support groups, and centers of excellence, the TAA engages with communities across the nation in an effort to provide tools, webinars, workshops, and support for all seeking assistance. As a primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast, the TAA supports the authentic conversations showcasing the diverse representation of the TS community. To learn more, visit Tourette.org, Tourette.org.
Talking about, even with when Tourette and ADHD go together like peas and carrots, like these things aren't always a great combination, like you're saying, but sometimes, it's not so bad. And
sometimes they come together like a beautiful marriage.
Yeah. Sometimes things can kind of work out. Maybe it's your energy level or your creativity or your drive, your obsession to do something. And I'm using the word obsession a little bit loosely right there.
Yeah.
But with me, one thing I do like about it that I do trace to my Tourette syndrome that might sound a little bit loose, but it's caused me over my life to, I think, spend a lot of time with myself, thinking about myself, or not wanting to be out in public, or, developing an introversion. But in these times by myself is when I've done a lot of self-development and I think discovered my talents and figured out things that I do like to do that are maybe solo activities that ended up becoming my career, like art and photography and things like that. And that is a benefit that I take from Tourette syndrome. And I think in the way to where when I get into the zone of doing something, that's, I hyper focus. If it's like a task or like a photo that I'm working on or writing something, I hyper focus and I get into this like flow state situation, and whatever I have diagnosis wise is not bothering me. The tics kind of go away, or they just don't bother me, or I'm really focused and I'm not, getting pulled out. And I feel like I can get a lot done in a way that I'm really proud of in a pretty short period of time. And I do connect that in kind of a loose way, but I do connect it with my experience in life with Tourette syndrome and those comorbidities. I mean, do you have any positives that you can associate with having something like this?
Yeah. Like I said, when I was 8, right, I'd been diagnosed for about a year, and I've been starting to settle in. Like, okay, I was in the shower, because usually in the shower, that's where I get all my ideas for jokes and stuff like that. I was in the shower, right, and I was thinking to myself, I have Tourette's. That's cool. I'm different from other people. That's cool too. So being different, having Tourette's, isn't as bad as I thought it would be. Because just because I have tics, and just because I make noises and twitches, doesn't make me any different from other people besides that fact.
Right.
Like, just imagine, like, you're in school trying to, like, concentrate on, like, an essay you're writing for school, and you hear just little me ticking in the background. It's kind of hard to concentrate, but that's just it, because you'll get used to it. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but you're just gonna get used to it, and people don't really notice it anymore. And that's, like you said, positives of having Tourette's. That's the positive of having it.
You can set an example that people can absorb, and again, just like having Tourette syndrome makes you, I think, more aware of what it might be like to have something else that people don't understand, and you make room for that in people's lives, and you're empathetic and understanding and all that. So that's the one big thing. But if that's something you can convey to other people too, while they're trying to understand your TS, hopefully that's like the bonus that comes with it. They understand what Tourette is in the context of you, but they also understand, like, here's a guy with something that's really misunderstood. And I guarantee you, everybody else in this room doesn't understand Tourette syndrome like he does. And, like, I'm trying to now. So this may be, I don't know, maybe I'm just being way too optimistic, but it's nice to think that you could convey that sense of empathetic power to people once they learn about something like TS that is so misunderstood, that people actually live with, but have so many misconceptions about. That is something that's really powerful that you can do. And I think that can be life affecting for other people. Yeah. Especially, and I've been saying this more lately, it's almost like the more people talk about it, especially early on, like you have, the greater the chances are of you being the first impression of someone with Tourette syndrome versus them watching a movie where it's being made fun of, or the mean-spirited comedy routine, where people make, like these like stupid Tourette jokes that don't make, it's like them just being mean-spirited. It's different. Yeah. But I just like the idea that you could be somebody's first impression with Tourette syndrome versus this, stigmatized thing that we all can't stand. That's such a cool thought, I think. And it is something that I think is going to grow in the future, especially, with social media and the way we can kind of build community online and present ourselves and new conventions and things like that. It's actually, I think, kind of an exciting time. I don't want this to sound cheesy, but I think it's kind of an exciting time to be young and have Tourette syndrome, just because of that. These tools that you have now to help communicate to people. Like, do you do anything online, social media, things like that?
I make TikToks. Like, I like doing comedy. I don't like dancing in front of my camera. I don't get why people get so much like, oh my God, you're amazing for dancing in front of a camera. No, I like doing like a bunch of I like cracking jokes and doing a little bit of comedy. And I would also do jokes on my my Tourette's. Like, I'd see a sound, like the song Without Me by Eminem.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then the part where you're like, oh, this looks like a job for me. So I would take that, like, all right, this is me trying to do a test in class. Like, I'm writing down, and then my Tourette's just goes, this looks like a job for me. And And I would just like another thing I would do. Another thing I would do, like let's say I've been having like a small tic attack, and then there's just one 5-year-old just staring, like just like you look back and you just made like intense eye contact. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you guys just have like a staring contest for like about like a half hour, and then you're like, all right, I gotta go. I'll see you later, and you just keep staring.
This is my favorite so far, I think.
Yeah.
Are there things that people don't seem to get with you? I mean, I assume you have had challenging experiences trying to convey this to someone. I mean, is there still that elusive thing that you're not able to kind of drive home in educating people you go to school with, or, you know, just your friends or whoever?
Yeah. So one time I made a friend. I'm not gonna say her name, but I made a friend, right? And then I say like a couple weeks after I've been talking to her, I'm like, hey, I have Tourette's. And she goes, oh, from like South Park? I go, oh, no, but it's crazy that you know what South Park is, but you don't know what Tourette's is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I told her, and she goes, oh, that's not how they did it on the show. And I go, exactly. That's not how it is. She goes, oh, that's okay. It's crazy that you know what South Park is, but you don't know what Tourette's is.
See, that's the thing. Like, that is the thing right there. That if you watch any episode of South Park, because I've heard from other people who say that they heard about, well, their impression of Tourette syndrome was the South Park episode. That's like the thing that stands out most in their mind. That's their experience. You know, they might have seen something else or watched a documentary, but South Park is the most prominent thing. And to take your cues, and this is not me like even slamming South Park or anything like that. They're an absurdist show. I mean, it's comedy that's pushed, and that's their whole thing.
I love South Park.
They try to do that. They try to push people's comfort and then kind of bring it home with a resolution. That's that's their formula. And there's some optimism that's baked in. But yeah, like the Tourette thing, like, yeah, you know, not my favorite, but still, it's not a documentary or a news show. So it does kind of let's just say hypothetically, my first awareness of some disorder out there in the world was from a South Park episode. Yeah. It wouldn't be my first instinct, and maybe it's because I have Tourette syndrome, but it wouldn't be my first instinct to say, okay, I know, I feel familiar with this disorder now. I know something I didn't know before while I'm watching a South Park episode. And so that's always the kind of thing, like when people are like, well, I saw the South Park episode. Is it kind of like, of course not. It's that's ridiculous, you know? And so that ends up being, it's like, I don't want the Tourette joke to hurt anybody, especially not kids. Yeah. You know, I don't want it to make parents anxious or anything like that. But we go to these places in our heads so quickly when it comes to thinking we understand what's going on, and I think that's maybe a better way of saying what I think I've been trying to say during the episode is that. Or during this conversation, is that, you know, if you practice awareness to kind of understand, you know, consider the source and all of that, you know, you're not going to be so sure of yourself. You may question things that you've heard. You may go back and think, you know, okay, so I've always heard that. I'm going to say something right now that's like totally made up. Yeah. Standing next to a microwave gives you cancer. I've heard people say that. And it's, you know, it's like, I've literally heard people say that, like, you know, you can get cancer from your microwave and you're not going to, that's not gonna, it's the kind of thing, you know, like people say it or people hear it and then they repeat it and then they repeat it again. Then all of a sudden 5 people think this and it just kind of becomes consensus knowledge when enough people say one thing. And that's the thing you kind of have to, I think, be a better consumer of information. So when you hear something for the first time, whether it's a joke about Tourette syndrome or a joke about whatever, especially coming from something like South Park, that's where I'm like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity to learn something new if I'm curious. This thing has been brought to me and it's intriguing or interesting. And I don't know, this is what I hope people do, because this is what I kind of like to do. I like to dig in and try to find, like the source information of why we think what we think. What do you want? I guess looking forward to transitioning into the 9th grade, are there any little pieces that you're nervous about? And I'm kind of asking this kind of maybe in context with other people who listening who might also be going into the 9th grade, or they're at the same point that you're at in life. Have you kind of talked to yourself about this? And, are there going to be, just to kind of bring it home to what we were talking about at the beginning, are there going to be any like new sets of nerves, or have you already negotiated with these things or played out scenarios in your head to make this a smoother transition? And just curious in case this is something that helps out other people.
Yeah. I'd say like I'm most nervous about like the kids. First off, kids are mean. Not all of them, but most of them. Kids will find weird ways to make fun of you, and that's fine. Like, listen, if I get bullied, I get bullied. Because that's how it go by. Like, I don't really care if I get bullied, because I know that I'm not what they think I am. So, but there's also like, I don't get offended by much. Like, I don't like Tourette jokes. Like, I laugh at them. Like I said, because these people have no idea what they're talking about. And like, if I get made fun of because of my Tourette's, that's fine. But like, you can't make fun of me individually. That's when I'm like, all right, that's enough. Like, I don't go home and tattletale about what people said about me. But there's also a side of me that's like, why? Like, I didn't do anything to them. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah. Frustrating.
Yeah. Like that's pretty much like all that like kind of scares me. Also, maybe the teachers as well, because
that's what I was going to ask about next.
Yeah.
If you have any nerves about teachers, and because I mean, they're the ones with the authority, and if their perception of you is going to affect your experience in school and your educational experience, that's a big deal. And and this is where I'm kind of stoked that you have the parents you have, because I know they're not going to let that happen. But yeah, what are your thoughts about teachers?
Well, number one, my mother's a teacher, so I kind of get where they're coming from. So like, if they have a kid with Tourette's, they might be a little skeptical because my mom had I'm not sure what it was called, but she had something. Then she immediately looked it up. But my 4th grade teacher, I'm not going to say her name because I don't want to point fingers, but she thought my Tourette's was behavioral and not neurological. So
yeah,
she would kind of find ways to kind of I don't want to say debunk, like to kind of upset me,
like
about,
discredit.
Yeah. So I don't want teachers that are like that, because I have to see those teachers every day, because like you said, they're the ones who have authority. Yeah. So that's pretty much that scares me more than the kids. Well, I want to say scare, like kind of nerve-wracking.
How do you think that's going to play out? I mean, I can definitely see being nervous, but I can also see after an honest conversation, hopefully if they don't get it, they at least make room for it in their minds that, okay, there's something I need to learn about. I shouldn't be a disciplinarian to someone who truly can't help, what they're doing in terms of tics and things like that might be viewed as disruptive by somebody on the outside. Yeah, that's a big thing to be nervous about. And I do remember going through grade school, and to be fair, this was back in the 1980s, and it's when, like, just people didn't know what Tourette syndrome was, on a conversational level. And when it was brought forward, or explained to teachers or that kind of thing, I don't think it was absorbed. I don't think they treated me fairly. I can remember a couple teachers, very much in particular, and I'm not going to say their names either, but were almost like aggressively trying to police me because they thought it was something that maybe in their minds they thought the solution was He just needs more discipline. He needs more, examples to follow. He needs more structure. And if I constantly yell at him and remind him that this is what he needs, then, he's going to get it. He's not going to look for this free pass of, I got Tourette syndrome. And that was a big thing for me. I didn't want anybody to think, especially teachers, that I was just, Tourette syndrome was my excuse and that I was looking for a way to get out of being punished if I made some disruptive sound or, I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't want that to happen. That's terrible because you can never break free of, if someone is decided in their mind and they kind of build a box or a fence around their idea of what you are and they have their own solution to it, they do it. And hopefully that teacher's failure to give me a good educational experience and rein me in and all that, hopefully that persisted, but she probably went on just thinking I was some sort of hopeless case or something, and I wouldn't amount to anything or whatever, I
actually kind of wanted to talk about like my tics in general.
Yeah. So in the context of your life with TS, do you see your tics as something that are they a daily nuisance to you, or are they something you accept, or are they painful, or what are your tics like?
Sometimes like it's like 50-50, like every day is a roll of dice. Sometimes sometimes my tics will push me over the limits. Like sometimes my tics will annoy me so much that I'll just like curl up into a ball and cry. But also like there are also some days that are like, okay, I like that I don't really necessarily see them. Like I don't really notice them. And like I said, like my tics can be painful sometimes. When I was younger, I had this head tic where I just like fling my head forward and I would like kind of like nod very violently. And I get really bad headaches, migraines and stuff like that. And
I had that last night. Yeah. Exactly what you described happened to me last night.
And today, I just noticed it today. I have this tongue tic where I'd scrape it against my teeth, and I'd get like bad canker sores. My tongue would hurt for like a week or maybe like 2 weeks.
Like right at the tip of your tongue?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I usually notice it when I bite my tongue. Like when I bite my tongue, I used to think that you could relieve canker sores from scraping your tongue against your teeth, which I came to realize that is not the case. It just gives you more. Yeah.
Do you have like different sets of tics that kind of come and go through your life?
I would, like tics would come and go. Like I'd have this one tic and maybe it'd go away after like a month or two. But there's also some tics that have stayed with me. Like I have this tic where I would smile like really like aggressively. Like I'd do it like when it first came, I was in like 5th, 6th grade, around there. I'd do that tic and like my friends were like, oh wow, that was aggressive. I don't like that. And I go, oh, it's just a tic. And
I was thinking about this because sometimes, and maybe I'll say this in the intro as well, but sometimes I worry with this podcast that I come off way too positive about Tourette syndrome.
Yeah.
And I want to be, but sometimes I feel like, I don't know. I don't want to discount the actual challenges and the fact that you can have tics that you just absolutely despise. And I was thinking more about it lately because one of my tics kind of morphed into another tic. It developed like a new part, and I really don't like it. It's embarrassing, and I just thinking about it, I feel like I have to do it. But basically, what it sounds like, I have this vocal tic that's kind of like, like I do that. That's my longest running tic. I've had it since I was like 5.
Yeah. And I have the same one. I've had it since I was like 8.
That one always gets me. I feel like I'm really practiced with it to where I can do that tic. Sometimes you can get a new tic, but you almost have to do it a bunch of times to kind of master it before you can move on. This tic is one I feel really comfortable with and at home with. But this new part has added itself to where, so I do the, and then after that, I immediately go, like a sad, like I turned into a sad cartoon or something.
Yeah.
And I did that at the grocery store, and I did it like 3 times, and I was in line, and this woman turned around and looked at me. I didn't say anything. I was like, oh, sorry, that's just my Tourette syndrome. I didn't feel like we had the time for a conversation about that. But yeah, it was definitely a reminder of like, you can't be so positive about this all the time. This is like, there are tics that people have that are just, they want to hit the delete button real hard. And I sure did. And so, yeah, for anybody who thinks and I'll repeat this a couple times, I think, over the course of the next few episodes. If I'm being too positive about all this, like, please call me out and check me on this, because I do want there to be acceptance. That's the bottom line. I want there to be self-acceptance and a way for us to explain it to where other people can understand it. And when it comes to, medications and things like that, treat yourself. Don't treat your Tourette syndrome. Treat yourself. What do you need? How do you live a better life? Is it just taking all kinds of meds to completely blanket down all these things that you have, tics and depressive? That doesn't sound like a great answer to me in my context. I'd rather tic and then have some other balance of things that make me feel like I'm where I need to be versus I need to get treated for Tourette syndrome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like this has been a good theme for this conversation about, just remembering what you need above all. And don't take it from me. Don't take it from, you can read so many things. Like, so there are so many Tourette memes that go around with certain slogans, and those are important and those are great. But if they don't agree with your life, that's completely fine. And you want to do something else with it, that's completely fine. To just remember yourself as an individual apart from that community.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Do you want to give any shout outs or anything like that before we wrap up? I definitely want to give you the floor for any final words you have.
Yeah, number one, I want to shout out my mother, because, without her, I don't think I'd cope with my Tourette's as well as I am right now. Yeah. She's been there, like, she didn't know what Tourette's was. Like, she was very, she was talking with her friend who she works with. She goes, listen, I don't know what's going on with Jack. Like, I don't know, maybe he has, ADHD, depression, anxiety, autism. I don't know what's going on with him. And she's like, oh, what's the matter with him? He keeps squinting and stuff like that. She goes, oh, well, he maybe have Tourette's. Like, my son has Tourette's. Maybe yours does too. And she didn't really think of it as much. And like that appointment that we made with my I was younger, I called him my Tourette's doctor. I called him his name was Dr. Jacobs. And as soon as we had that appointment with him, he goes, yeah, your son has Tourette's. That's what it is. And like right away, like she read up on it. She listened to interviews with people with Tourette's. She like you said, she read articles, and without her, I don't think I'd actually be here today. I'll be 100% honest. Also, I want to shout out my father because before I was diagnosed, my father didn't really like that I was making noises. He didn't understand it at all. But right after, exactly like my mom, like he read up on it, and he has tics as well. He's someone who I could relate to on a daily basis because he has some of the same tics as I do right now. Like he had some vocal tics. Also, I want to shout out my idol, Samuel Comroe, because listen, I met him, really, really good guy. And I think I'll be doing something else rather than writing jokes, because I think writing jokes is great, but even if he wasn't there, I'd still watch stand-up comedy. But if he isn't there, then I wouldn't want to do it as much as I do now.
Thanks for listening. Thanks so much to Jack Kearney. And I have to give a shout out to his parents, of course. Eternal thanks to a supportive corner at home. And obviously with support at the home, Jack is the boss of his Tourette, as much as anyone can be with involuntary movements. Jack, that was awesome and really wise. Loved it. I want to talk about this more when I know a little bit better what I'm talking about, but Sophia put up a really interesting poll about vocal tics, and it's interesting because one of the arguments I've heard is that, there's no real difference between vocal tics and motor tics, that they're all motor tics. And what we call vocal tics are just motor tics from the vocal cords or something like that. That's a very sloppy way of, I think, explaining it. And I'm probably leaving a lot out, including potential challenges to that. But anyway, check out this poll and weigh in. People are commenting on it too. Super interesting what the majority of the people are saying about their vocal tics. It's not a major scientific poll or anything, but it is interesting in the results among the people who've weighed in. And so the post from Sophia says, Ben and I were just discussing our experiences of vocal tics, and an interesting question has emerged. When you have vocal tics, what is it that satisfies the urge? And so you can choose from 3 answers. The action of making the sound, the actual sound that is produced, or the volume and pitch of the sound. Like, what is it that satisfies the urge when you do vocal tics? And there may be thorough science already looking at all of this. This is just, a poll that we put up just to see where people in the discussion group community are. But among the people who've voted in this poll, there's definitely a dominant answer. Go check it out. Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook, maintained by the amazing and brilliant Sophia. Really important part of the podcast, and I want everybody to know that. She deserves a ton of credit. Thank you, Sophia. Thanks also, of course, to our primary sponsor, the Tourette Association of America. They make this podcast possible in the end. They also help me with ideas and projects. If you go to Tourette.org, Tourette.org, you'll find resources for many different parts of the Tourette universe, being us people with Tourette, kids and adults, and our family members, our parents, and our doctors, and our scientists, and our educators at school, like Jack was talking about, the big things that Tourette can impact or vice versa. All in focus at Tourette.org. Geeks Rising is the name of the greatest podcast network of all time. It also happens to be the home of Tourette's podcast. At Geeks Rising, there's a supportive non-Tourette audience, which is awesome. You can find all the past episodes of Tourette's podcast at geeksrising.com. You can give individual support in small ways if you want at patreon.com/Tourette's podcast. Completely no pressure. The podcast won't ever be behind a paywall or a pledge drive or anything like that. It's covered and it's here thanks to the Tourette Association. This is an independent podcast in terms of ownership, but TAA's support has been amazing. We'll be back next week, but send me an email. Use the contact form at tourettespodcast.com, or you can use tourettespodcast@gmail.com, especially if you want to send me an audio file, maybe a recording of you commenting or asking a question, something I can play on a future episode. All right, talk to you again soon. This is Ben.